Thank you so much for coming on our platform and talking to us on our Eco Chat segment that we have. It's lovely to finally have you here. So if I introduce you to the team, I'm Nelma. I'm the founder and CEO of the platform, which is Nelma London. And then Laura, she's based in London with me, and you've been liaising with her. And then we have Sandy, she's over at Taiwan. And you also have Marina, who's over at Albania. Laura wanted to invite you on our platform is because of your brand and having that inclusivity and being able to design not just for quote unquote normal people, whatever that is to anyone. I think we're all normal in our own, in our own life and in our own circumstances. I think that was one of the reasons why she wanted to have you on here. By starting off, if you can just start off with just telling us who you are, introducing yourself and what your background is, and then we can we'll start off with that, and then we'll just have a follow on, questions as we go on.
So yes, I'm Von. Full name is Vongai. I'm a British fashion designer based in Paris now. Just working on my inclusive clothing brand, which you may or may not have seen much of on the actual social media yet, because it's all in the works. How I basically came to this kind of point was I did a bachelor's in fashion design in Nottingham University, and then after that I actually did a master's here in Paris. Since then, obviously, I wanted to stay, so it was a great opportunity to stay here and kind of be in that fashion capital. And then now I am also working in the fashion tech community, but also specifically in the inclusive fashion industry as well with this brand. So hopefully that is kind of the start of something amazing.
So what was the inspiration behind the actual brand itself then? I know you started off with looking at and being inclusive because of your background and because of your siblings. Was that like the prime objective, is that you want to create something that is inclusive, and then it sort of evolved from there?
Pretty much, yeah. And actually the way it started, officially, you can say, was when I was in my second year of university, in the bachelor's, and we had this project where we had to think about, or at least consider, people with disabilities within our designs. The lady who had actually approached with this project had been in a wheelchair for just a few months after a skiing accident. So from there, she thought it would be great to have designers to actually consider that, because she noticed the gap in the market. And considering I already had siblings with autism, I had already seen what they were struggling with, but I never thought I could do anything about it until that point, really. And that's kind of the inspiration behind it, as well as obviously doing all this research I've done since then, speaking with people one-to-one with all sorts of disabilities from all spectrums. And that has really continued to be an inspiration, really, because you're always learning about, what the symptoms are, what the conditions are, but also what they struggle with on a daily basis, including just simply putting on clothing. And that's also what kind of drives my designs as well, because I think that's kind of then the challenge that makes it so much more interesting to be like, okay, so what's the solution to this and that, and putting it all together so it's inclusive rather than just adaptive.
So can you just talk us a bit more about how you work around when you're designing the garment? How is it that you sort of design it so that you're taking in all aspects as someone having a disability?
Actually, there are so many things to consider in terms of, kind of what you've rightly mentioned about, kind of the textures, colors, but also, again, the actual functionality of someone maybe who may be in a wheelchair, how they might put it on. So what I did was, throughout the research, I was kind of looking at people with and without disabilities. What are the common things that they all struggle from? And the main ones really are just simply putting on a garment. You guys have probably experienced something like that with like a jumpsuit, for example. You want to go to the
jeans, or jeans.
Jeans were another common one as well. Skinny jeans, exactly. But we all love them, right? But we still need something to kind of keep it comfortable at the same time. So it's having that balance. So the way I kind of put all of that together is, after I've made my design, or sketched it out, I look at it and I'm like, right, does someone in a wheelchair, would this be accessible for them? Or someone with sensory needs, are they able to benefit from this garment? Someone who is an amputee, are they able to wear this easily? If they have a leg amputation and they're wearing a prosthetic, for example, they may need a bit more room to put it on and stuff as well. So these are the questions I ask, and that's how I kind of come to the final decision of, right, I think this is good, I think this is ready. Now there is always room for improvement, so as I go along I do always try to ask people, do you think you would wear this? And I've done that with the previous things that you've already kind of mentioned, with the dress as well as the jumpsuit that I showed on ITV News. I got a whole lot of feedback from that, which was really great. It is also kind of looking at, what more can I do to take it a bit step further for the next collection.
I was very interested in your master's thesis. It sounded fascinating. Could you tell us more about that and what conclusions you came to? The question, just for anyone that doesn't know, was, I believe, how could mainstream clothing be inclusive in the needs of disabled consumers?
Actually, for that thesis, I previously did a dissertation in my final year of bachelor's on fashion media, the rejection of disability in fashion media overall. So we were talking about campaigns and stuff. Then I wanted to take it a bit further into actual brands, because you may have seen people or brands who do include people with disabilities in their campaigns, but their actual products that they're marketing has nothing that is inclusive about it. Maybe some people can wear it, but it's not really thought out for that market. And what I've really found is that it is quite difficult, I guess, for big brands to start now having a whole new department. But, if we've already kind of thought about some brands who have onboarded plus size categories, petite categories, tall categories, why is there still then a gap for inclusive category? And even that, my conclusion really was, we don't even need an inclusive category. Why don't we just have it to be the norm, to just have that where, we just know that this skirt, it's, I guess, your normal wrap of a skirt.
It's accessible. It's accessible to the wide market instead of narrowing it down.
Exactly. And the main point really is so that we're not still having that segregation that already exists. Some people just don't have the interest, I guess, to look into that market. Maybe they just never come across people with disabilities as often as maybe others who have and who are now working on it. It takes work, it takes research, and there isn't much out there yet for you to just kind of read and be like, okay, cool, I know the market. There is still a lot of primary research that a business would have to do to make it possible.
Like, I can see there's a lot of work that you need to do when you're designing clothes. Like, you have to do a lot of research and actually talk to people with disabilities to understand their needs. I'm wondering, like, what is the biggest difficulties when it comes to designing for you?
I don't know if it's the right thing to say that I don't have difficulties with the designing, because in fact, yes, there are challenges to make everything inclusive and fashionable at the same time. But that is a great challenge that actually keeps me going, to keep giving me more ideas rather than holding me back. Because usually with the word difficulty, it's kind of insinuating that it's hold setback. But for me, it's actually what keeps me going. It's what gets the innovation, because as I mentioned before, I'm also interested in technology, fashion technology specifically. So with that, I'm able to kind of look at how to solve certain issues, maybe with the buttons, how I'm laser cutting them instead of making the standard ones, those kind of things that I'm always kind of looking out for to make the clothing innovative, also fashionable and inclusive as well.
With that, going off of the back of you being interested in technology, I know that you've just joined a fashion lab, which is in Innovation Lab, which is in Paris. So can you talk us a bit more about what's the basis of that? Is it an academy for startup and technology companies within the fashion industry? What is the background of that company, and have they actually launched?
Well, actually, I joined right at the beginning last year after I had graduated. We actually launched together last November. What it is really is a space to pioneer fashion tech, because I'm sure you guys are already familiar with Paris and its name to be a fashion capital. But that comes obviously from the traditional fashion, its heritage of Dior, Chanel, all of that. But actually we are thinking of how can we move this further with all the startups that exist today. And it's very possible to make that work with the different technologies. We have a space there we call the maker space, where we have all different technologies such as 3D printers, laser cutters, which I'm also using for my buttons, for example, and body scanners. So these are new technologies that can really help to innovate the fashion industry, make it more optimized, more convenient. As customers as well of fashion, we like things on demand. So, you know, how are we also creating a space like that with technology? So we have an incubator where we do work on this with the startups. And actually we're starting the next cohort actually literally in like 2 weeks. And that's where we work with different people from different backgrounds all over the world. We've had people from different countries. We're kind of an extension of IFA Paris, which is a fashion institution. So we work with the students there as well with their projects.
That kind of leads me to one of the questions that we sent you, which was about your designs incorporating functionality and that they incorporate that alongside style. Could you tell us, for anyone who hasn't seen your collection or isn't familiar with the idea, give us an example of a piece of functionality that you would find in your clothing that's not elsewhere?
You will have to kind of wait to see that with the next collection. I can tell you, obviously, with what I am kind of solving, that is different from what's currently there on the market. So, for example, the positioning of zips. And, you know, many women, when I was researching, have also complained about this. I'm sure you guys have experienced the same thing where, you know, you have the zip right at the back of, you know, the dress, and then maybe no one's there to help you. So you really have to kind of stretch and do it yourself. So it's kind of stuff like that I've looked into, and how to simply reposition the zip. But there are many more things like, you know, eradicating the small buttons that we see on shirts. You know, it's these things that, you know, are they necessary? Can we change it? And these are the things I'm always asking myself. And the answer usually is yes. So let's change it. And what can come from there, pretty much. Yeah.
And what is the difference between inclusive and adaptive for our audience who might not be familiar with the two terms? I've heard them be used interchangeably, but clearly there is a difference.
I usually like to prefer inclusive, because inclusive for me is kind of what it says, like it's including within the fashion industry, all the clients, all the customers that I may be in contact with, they are all in kind of one box, rather than we're saying that, you know, people with disabilities are in that box, people without disabilities are in that box. That's definitely non-existent for me in my brand, because that's what I kind of get when people use the term adaptive, because then you're kind of saying that you're adapting to someone or something, but whereas I don't think we should say that we're adapting when we are actually including, so that, you know, the options are the same for both those with disabilities and those without. That's what I've mentioned with kind of what I've said with the kind of buttons that I'm using, the zips, but there are a lot more that I am doing for the next collection, so definitely do look out for that as well.
And in terms of your sustainability credentials, what are you doing to make sure that alongside this inclusivity and all the other great work you're doing, there's also a sustainability element?
In the world of fashion at the moment, it is very important to consider that if you haven't started already, because, you know, the planet is definitely important. I love nature already, so now implementing that with my liking for inclusivity, I'm like, yeah, let's have like a kind of a triple threat within the fashion industry where I'm being inclusive, bringing technology, but also being sustainable as well. So the way that kind of happens with me, with the way I'm planning things, is definitely sourcing locally. That's one of them, so that we already kind of reduce the shipping emissions and things like that. But then it's also looking at the actual fabrics that I'm sourcing, like what we mentioned with Nelma about, you know, having the sensory needs. So are these fabrics suitable for someone who may have sensory needs, or is it kind of too rough? If the answer is yes, that it's fine, then is it sustainable would be also the next question. And obviously it's quite difficult as a new startup to have everything sourced that is sustainable. It's extremely expensive, and I know that's why some people are kind of thrown back by it, but I think you definitely have to start somewhere. So that's what I'm doing, kind of mixing the naturals with the synthetics for now, and kind of taking it from there. And at some point, it would be great to be fully sustainable with that.
Previous collections that you have designed, are those sustainable fabric that you've used?
So with the previous one, it wasn't like a full-on collection. It was kind of testing the market, seeing what works. So those were all sourced locally, but they weren't, I guess, like natural fibers, if that's what you're asking. Yeah, but that's what I'm sourcing now for the newer collections, where it is going to be more production.
Can we get a sneak peek into just knowing what type of like natural fibers? Because I'm like a big I'm doing my own research behind manufacturing natural fibers. So is there any chance of just knowing what type of natural fibers that you're looking at?
Well, it is definitely important to kind of start with the basics of, for me, it's kind of the 100% cottons, because not only is it sustainable, but it's also very soft. So that's one of the ones I'm looking at. The others are still kind of being researched as well. So I don't really have like a list of those, but definitely that will be kind of the starting point.
And what do you think is next for both for you guys and going forward, and for this area of fashion?
So definitely the next steps would be making sure that this new collection is awesome and then launching that, and also seeing just the feedback from people, because there is always something to learn. That's definitely like the priority for the next step. And then the other priorities are obviously what are the ways to be more sustainable as well within either the fabrics themselves, or even when I'm doing deliveries to the customers, what are the different ways. There are many different kind of initiatives that I've started in that sense, so it's kind of looking at more of those things as well.
In terms of recruiting, what kind of criteria are you looking for in a worker on the idea of inclusivity?
The main one really is to just be very passionate about that subject. It's great to have a team that are amazing in this and that, but if you don't have the passion for that actual subject, there's only so much your skills can get you. So that's definitely one of the priorities, but also the skills as well for the different kind of departments that I'm going to be creating. Just like any other brand, you need good people for your marketing, for the design as well. At the moment, I'm doing kind of everything myself, but as the team is growing, soon I will be looking for obviously people within the different departments. But yeah, that is pretty much the main thing, that they do have a passion for the subject, and that they do see the potential for the future for it as well.
Are you thinking about finding someone to work with you, that someone has disability, to join your team?
Yes. Oh, thank you for mentioning that, actually, because I do think it's very important to do the primary research, especially with people with disabilities, if you're going to be inclusive. So obviously, if you're going to be inclusive, the whole team itself has to be inclusive. So it can be the team from the design aspect, because they can give you insights on that from their perspective, but also just the overall research itself should definitely include different people from different spectrums. Now, it is difficult, obviously, to always have everyone included on a team. So that's why it's always good to source even further for the research itself, even if the people aren't on the team.
You have drew the attention of one of the most famous magazines, of Vogue. How do you feel about it?
That was really amazing. That was actually before I was doing everything I'm doing now. So this was when I was just in my creative element, still finding myself as a designer. And that specific feature was actually on the wallpaper dresses that I made. And yeah, they really absolutely loved it and wanted to feature it there. So that was really an amazing achievement, and definitely one of the ones that I hold close to my heart. And hopefully there'll be much more features like that for what's coming soon. Because I think what's important is not just, oh yay, I'm featured in a big magazine. It's also actually, because that big magazine has such a huge following, they are now also influencing those seeing this on their social media and obviously their online platform. So if we're now including more people with disabilities from maybe my future campaign, that is actually enough. They won't even need to mention me as the brand or the designer in that sense. They can literally just focus on the fact that this is an inclusive brand. These are the models, that sort of thing. Yeah.
And that's enough, isn't it? I think just to be able to be in that marketplace or be in the catalyst to ignite that change is enough in its own. maybe I need to do a bit more research. I don't think I've come across another brand that is inclusive in terms of design and functionality apart from yours. I don't know, do you know any other brands?
Yeah, there are some really small brands that are starting to do it. There is definitely much more to push. There is so much more to do. And this is why I wrote that dissertation about the keyword being mainstream fashion. Because yes, we have all these small businesses doing great things, but it won't really be out there unless the big dogs in the industry also push that idea forward as well.
Hopefully you will be the change that ignites this industry and, and being inclusive and being diverse. And we can't wait to see your design. Is it an actual collection?
Yeah, this time around is an actual collection that will be also commercial, so people will be able to purchase it this time if they hopefully like it. And then from that as well, I'll be just it's kind of like the soft launch to see are people liking this, and then from there we can continue pushing it much further and scaling.
Has the pandemic affected or improved in terms of the way that you think about your business and your design moving forward?
Not the design aspect, but definitely the business aspect, because actually now more than ever people are really at home. You know, it's kind of how can we look at something that is easier, more on demand for people in their own homes without having to physically touch the clothes, physically seeing them before purchasing. So online shopping was already a big thing before COVID, but it's kind of how do we take that a step further? So this is where kind of the technology
exactly
comes in.
Yeah. Thank you very much for coming on here and speaking to us. It's been absolutely amazing talking to you. We'll keep in touch and keep us up to date with your collection. We can't wait for that. Thank you very much, Von, for coming on and talking to us on our Eco Chat. And team, thank you very much once again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.